Bang, we in it.
All right, but how do we intro? I forgot how we introed last time.
You can intro however you'd like.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another art review with Sam and Mike. I am at Rhystic Studies, Vorthos Mike, at Vorthos Mike.
Hi.
Hashtag MilkDudBestDog. Mike, introduce yourself so we can get rolling right away.
Okay, first people the thing need to know is Milk Dud is the best dog. He's one of my 3 wiener dogs, and I'm Vorthos Mike. I talk about that art. I talk about that flavor. I'm over at Gathering Magic, hustling art every week. And I'm also the one that organizes the art shows in case you were at Vegas last year. And hopefully you go to Vegas again this year, as well as the Pro Tour 25, which may have an art component.
Oh, baby.
Little pro tip. Pro tip. I'm coming to Minneapolis in August. Just
throwing a little flavor in there.
Little spoiler. Spoiler alert. Little preview.
Little bit of taste.
A little bit of the best parts, the taste. So we talk about art. Sam covers a part. I cover a part. That's kind of it. There's a few other people talking about it, but really we're the ones that dig into this deep.
Sure. And usually you talk about art on snack time with your buddy Aunt Tessitore, who writes flavor text. But we decided if we're going to talk about art, we're gonna put it in a video. So last time we did the art review for Ixalan, and it worked really, really well. I think people clung to that. And so, of course, we got to talk about Unstable this time because it's the new set, it's the new hotness, and it looks way different than normal Magic sets. So Mike and I are going to get right into that right away.
Okay.
First of all, go for it.
Main themes.
Yes, sir.
Main themes. Most important thing, we're going from the top. Main themes on is Whimsy.
Yep.
It's Whimsy, which we're going to come back to. But what makes it whimsical, Sam?
So what's whimsical about Unstable, apart from the mechanics, from just a purely visual standpoint, is this world, this new Magic plane, is maybe for the first time since Alpha and Beta that Magic is taking the real world, the current modern day world, and using it as an inspiration to make something silly. A lot of these creatures, a lot of these cyborgs, for example, will be holding everyday objects that you find in your house, like toasters, coffee kettles. There's just a lot of presence of modern day stuff that you don't see in a high fantasy environment like Magic. You couldn't put a toaster on Amonkhet. That just would not make sense. So what we're seeing a lot in Unstable is the real world blended with fantasy, and I think that adds to the whimsical feel and is presenting us with something that we don't see a lot. Mike, you wrote about Whimsy very recently, and you kind of covered the trajectory of how Whimsy has been in the past, in the last 200 years in the visual arts. Something that came from a more surreal, dreamlike situation, and now how it's transformed into humor. And we kind of got there through, your article touches on Dali to Dr. Seuss to Lewis Carroll. So I'd like you to kind of define Whimsy and how it relates to Magic specifically.
Right. I mean, Whimsy is, in a word, it's optimism. It's playfulness, silliness mixed with optimism. And Dr. Seuss epitomizes that. It's the easy thing that everyone can think of when you talk about a spatula. You can immediately think of a Dr. Seuss story with a Who in Whoville doing just random, ridiculous things. The most recent example is Cloud Cuckoo Land in the Lego movie, where everything is just random, but everything's friendly. It isn't random in a chaos sense, in an apocalyptic sense. It's this, things are going to get better, and things are odd and unusual, but in a good way. So I wrote a little article on this, and I compared and contrast, which is very Henrik Wolflin, which is like the founder of current art history, a theory, really, in which you take something that is and something that isn't, and you compare and contrast them side by side. Usually this was with slide projectors way back in the day, but people don't even know what an overhead projector is anymore. Like, it just doesn't exist. They're like, oh, like a PowerPoint, and I'm like, yeah, like that.
Yeah, but you could write on it. You could write with an expo.
I know. Come on, and erase it too, which you're becoming a professor.
I've done that a couple times. I like getting my hands wet with chalk.
Oh my God,
dry with chalk. Yeah, man.
Just terrible.
Yeah.
But all of these things happen at the same time. So for us to say, well, magic is illustration and it has a longer history, it goes back to Norman Rockwell. Well, a lot of this idea of illustration and this fantastical things really isn't that old in the history of art. It's like 1800s, really? I mean, prior to that, there was religious art, but you can't put Jesus, fighting a space vampire. That doesn't make any sense. But, they didn't have film. They didn't have an ideal already made where you can't paint it any more realistic. And then they made a photograph where it's like, you can't make it any more realistic. That's what it is. So then people started deconstructing it. And that's how someone put a urinal on top of a pedestal and saying, that's a fountain. And then they deconstructed the process of art, and then deconstructed the idea, and then deconstructed who an artist is. And all of those things happen in like 70 years. Like, it was really, really fast. Industrial Revolution, and went boom, 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 boom. So Whimsy happened as almost an escapism. They pulled away from the terribleness of London, pulled away from some of the things happening in Paris, and had this optimistic view of the future. This is when World's Fairs came into being, into what about the fantastical things? And they looked into myth and legend, and some of the Grimm fairy tales also came out around this time because they wrote them all down. And how that affects us here is that magic has always had this. We've leaned on them. We just call them tropes. Oh yeah, that's just what it is. A melting clock, immediately, oh, it's like a dreamlike state, it's surrealism, it's Dali. You just know that. Even if you haven't studied art, you just know that. And in magic, this set Unstable says, okay, how can we utilize some of those things while keeping a separate plane of it in and of itself? So it's not affecting, Baloth, and it's not affecting our Gatewatch, and it's not affecting the Weatherlight, and making them into a thing. And I think they were successful there. And I think you have been yapping nonstop on Twitter on one of my favorite books as a kid, the 11th Hour and Animalia series, which by Graham Base, which is arguably, fundamental up with Dr. Seuss on this whimsical remixed idea. And I'd love for you to talk about that, because it gets this optimistic view of animals all coexisting and not everybody's eating each other.
Yeah, I was looking at this set as it was spoiled and previewed, and I just couldn't. I knew that it was relating to something, but I couldn't put my mind. I had to cast my mind way back to like first grade, discovering these books for the first time, flipping through Animalia, and I remember vividly just opening that book, looking at the first page, and not flipping through it immediately. You end up just staring at that page, looking for every minor detail and finding something new every time you look at it, and just being kind of astonished by like the visual overload of those books. So I knew I saw this somewhere, and I wanted to bring up Graham Base because it sort of relates to what I said at the beginning, is like we are using everyday objects, but we're also using animals that we see in nature, in a high fantasy environment. What is a Baloth? A Baloth isn't really, a real thing. It's like some sort of exaggerated beast-like rhino type thing with a different face. But in Unstable, much like in Graham Base's work, we're using just real animals from the everyday. So a great example of this is the card Druid of the Sacred Beaker.
Sure.
And the subtype in that is a deer, bird, ape, druid, right? Because it's three animals in one, some sort of like chimeric mess.
Yep.
But and if you look at the meld creatures, you see the same sort of thing where you have like a half shark or a half kitten or a half whatever. Or even like a half man, for example.
Damien Hirst, sure, I get you.
So and again on you previewed this card on Snack Time, Hydradoodle. It's a Hydradoodle on Hydrahound, or a Hydrahound on Hydradoodle.
It was good.
So it just reminded me very much of the visual overload, but also what you're doing with an animal. I just wrote a paper on anthropomorphization, which is basically, you take a non-human thing and assign it human qualities, and you're seeing that all over Graham Base's work. You're seeing that in Unstable, where suddenly an eagle is a scientist. And that, I think, is lending itself to the humor and the whimsy that you're talking about. So I want you to keep that in mind when we're looking through the set. The real world was very much kind of the baseline for Unstable. And then from there, they whimsified it and created a plane out of it. And I think that's why you're seeing Unstable in its own realm in terms of what you're used to seeing on Magic cards.
Well, I think that you hit that nail on the head there, that they built their own world. You couldn't take Dominaria and just say, it's going to be weird now. And next set, it's going to be back to normal. That ain't going to happen. It just didn't make sense. And I understand that an unset making sense is comical. but at that same point, we've seen a core set which was random stuff all thrown together. And then they said, all right, we're going to make it on Chandelar. And everyone was like, okay, cool. It's Chandelar law. Remember that from the video game? That was cool, neat. No one even raised a question. They were like, everyone's fine. Then they went in conspiracy and said, we're going to make it on Fiora. And everyone's like, okay, that could have been cool. Chandelar or whatever, fine. And both of those are building blocks.
Sure.
And seeing how those planes were successful in the world building, and the market research probably showed that players were like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about it. Yeah, that works totally fine. To say, what if Unstable could do that too? That would allow us more breathing room to supplement the world, instead of having to be forced into, well, we need to have a kind of Shiv feeling for that. It's like, just do whatever you want. Bring in some brilliant concept artists, and you guys can slowly make this in your spare time, which Mark Rosewater has mentioned. And probably why it took so long to do this is, there wasn't an ability to say, well, just do another plane. Well, because there wasn't an example of that. It was Dominaria for years and nothing. And then they added Mirrodin, and then they added Ravnica. And mind you, the last set, there was only a couple planes. Now there's a ton, and we just take it for granted. But back then, there wasn't other options. So absolutely hitting on that well. From that, what about the references in the set?
Yeah, that's the other half of Unstable, is that it gets to be self-referential, self-parodical. You get to poke fun of Magic from the inside view, something that New World Order doesn't really allow, right? Mark Rosewater and the team really wants this game to be accessible from people from the outside, and nothing feels worse than trying to access, be it a fan base or a subculture or anything from outside, and only getting laughed at because you don't understand all the in-jokes.
Which they learned in Time Spiral.
Oh, yes.
It's not something they've always known. I mean, in Time Spiral, they tried that. And there were so many references that some of them had 2 references built into it, and no one got it. Like, nobody got it. And even, like, deep Vorthoses, we weren't really organized back then. We only really got organized maybe, like, after the recession, like 2008, 2009. So there wasn't someone to always be writing articles to say, this is what this thing is. This is what this thing. And if it was too deep, it just never got seen. And then all that love and care didn't get did. And I know you made a list of some of these, and I was like, oh yeah, man, I remember that other one. I'm an old timer. I totally get what that is.
Yeah, and we've talked about Time Spiral on Twitter as Unstable being sort of a Time Spiral 2.0
totally.
or a smaller version of Time Spiral, because they're allowed to experiment with mechanics that would never work, like putting trample on a sorcery that deals damage.
Word.
That's fun and whimsical and silly, and again, an in-joke that only Magic players get because they've never seen trample on a sorcery, but suddenly the light bulb goes off and you say, well, that could actually work. So we might see that in the future.
Totally.
But these visual self-references, these things that we get to, nudge our elbows at and laugh at. The first one is Sword of Dungeons and Dragons. And this was a card that was previewed quite early in the preview season, and people went nuts about it. Wizards of the Coast owning Dungeons and Dragons allowed this to happen, so in terms of branding and copyright and stuff, it works. The sword itself is very good, but what I like a lot is that they recalled Chris Ron to do this and complete his cycle of swords, because in Mirrodin, right? Mirrodin, Scars of Mirrodin,
Yep.
Chris Ron painted all those swords, and it's nice to have a visual just consistency across all of the cycles. So Swords of Dungeons and Dragons getting done by Chris Ron is a cool in-joke, not only from the art perspective, but also within the game of Magic. So you got that. Another one is Staff of the Letter Magus. Shout out to Morgan Rechtworth. She loves books, and this is a book and library card, but it's a reference to the Staff of the Sun Magus and Staff of the Death Magus, a staff of 5 or a cycle of 5 staffs that were in M14, I believe.
And duels. They were a huge thing in duels.
Okay, yeah, yep. Painted by Daniel Lundgren. So he painted the original staffs, and this one's a parody of those staffs, and they brought the artist back. And again, it just gives the visual style a cohesion across multiple blocks.
So you had a couple more of these, and obviously one is straight up the opposite image of really epic punch. which
Yes.
I saw you put this in the show notes, and I'm like, oh, Sam.
Yeah, because that was a moment of whimsy in a super serious set that people loved, and you're allowed to do that in Magic. You can have like, Gimli in the Lord of the Rings is the comic break, the comic relief,
Sure.
and you can do that when you're doing something super serious. So it's fun to recall that because that's kind of like a joke or a punchline that could have potentially just fallen flat on its face. People could have said that's super lame, don't do that, and then the joke is lost. But people really loved that. The fans loved that in Dragons of Tarkir and Khans of Tarkir.
Sure.
So making another a third to that cycle is really fun. Same thing with Kind Slaver, right?
Yeah.
A reference to Mind Slaver, which
yep.
is the one of the most hated cards in existence.
Oh, it's
if you've
terrible.
ever been Mind Slaver.
It's terrible. It's literally terrible.
But then they turn that on its head and say, hey, you're not going to be controlled by your opponent. You're going to be controlled by someone outside of the game. And then it brings like a different feel to the environment and the draft environment in the game store. So
Sure.
It's fun when you can be self-referential and still and not be harsh or not be not rely on potty humor, which I think early unsets really dabbled with, and it didn't work as well. So I like seeing that. And then finally, we have Krark's Other Thumb. There's other self-references, but this one's a perfect visual reference from to Ron Spencer from Jeff Miracula. So it's nice to see that Krark's Other Thumb allows you, instead to flip new coins, it allows you to roll dice. So
Yeah.
those are little Easter eggs for veteran Magic players, and I think an unset is a perfect environment for that to happen and flourish.
Yeah, it's almost like, can we fit this into another set? Can we fit this in a commander? Can we fit this into a core set? And you're like, yeah, maybe. And then, if it's in the maybe pile, there could be something more cool that you put in instead, and then it sits in the other pile. And that, you could see the development cycle of that, where they could be like, this is a really good idea. This is a really good idea. This is really a good idea. How can we get these into things? Like, really epic punch, that doesn't need to be in this set. It really doesn't. This could be in a variety of other things, but if it was sitting in a pile, they could say, oh, yeah, we had this one thing, we need a removal spell. Totally cool. That sounds great. And it almost has like this outlet every few years. Like if these happened every 3 years, you could have these pent-up ideas that a designer could jettison finally from their mind and then come up with all fresh things. Otherwise, they keep thinking about Kind Slaver, and then they're like, oh, man, I just need something new. But you just need to get it out. You need to get it printed. You need to get it done.
Get it out of your creative system.
Well, yeah, especially considering how long it took to get this last one did.
Right, yeah.
Like, we cannot understate that it took 13 years.
13 years, man. And Mark Rosewater, the hype man of Magic, has had to keep this in his back pocket for more than a decade. Like, that's unbelievable. Poor guy, that's how he went gray.
Yeah, well.
13 years. But what does that time allow you to do in terms of, if you were an art director, what are you doing in 13 years, or maybe in 3 or 4 years once the set is actually finalized and you need art for it? How is that different from any sort of other Magic set?
Well, I mean, this set was condensed. It took a while to get the ideas, but the art came together more quickly. I mean, a lot of this art wasn't painted 6 years ago. A lot of this art was painted 3 to 1 years ago. Like, I think Mike Burns started on the unset, and then his first card came out in Amonkhet, just because how timing worked. And that's not uncommon for artists to do, where they'll be like, oh, that card is out. And usually when you see that or hear that in person, that's an interesting thing to say. It's because it wasn't their first card that they were working on, or the one they were expecting to come out next, just by how sequentially they worked. So by doing that, you can't stretch this out over 6-8 years, because the artistic styles may not mesh anymore. So if you're working on just contraptions, all the contraptions people need to be working on all together at the same time. So all those dudes doing the concept push, because they actually had a concept push because they had to build the world. Like every Magic set, they bring in some artists for like a week or two, depending on. And they just sit in a room and they just pound out stuff. End of each day or halfway through the day, they put stuff on a wall and say, yep, nope. I have a bunch of concept artworks that I've bought, and there's stamps on them from Jeremy Cranford and Jeremy Jarvis, and it's like, great, and it has like a frog face. It's pretty funny.
No way,
it's
really?
like, great. It's like a big frog.
Like your third grade teacher.
Yeah, it literally
excellent.
is like a third grade teacher thing. It's super funny, and he had fun with it because everyone was like, man, I got to get that frog stamp, yo. So these guys just sat in here and they worked on these murals together. Because mind you, they had an idea. Okay, agents. What's the sneak look like? What's the crossbreed labs? What does that feel like? And in doing so, on the concept push, they're like, we need these contraptions, guys. And they're all there, so they're like, all right, let's do a live, baby. So Prescott made one piece, super big. Of course he's going to do goblins. Like, he knows those ears. He knows the weight of those ears. He's got it good. The one,
got them flops going, those gobbo flops.
That goblin with the hammer on his head, like, that's just so Prescott.
Sure.
He writes notes to his kids every morning on, like, their lunch like bags, like the paper bags, and they're always this most ridiculous. He puts them on Facebook, and they're just hilarious. But like, it's straight up just lives like this man is so good with whimsy. So I mean, his was super fun. Chuck Lucas's was super fun. They had the dog snail engine. Thanks Blake Rasmussen for that preview. Super fun. But they chopped them up. So they made these as polyptychs.
Yeah, what's a polyptych? First of all, that's not a real word.
That is indeed a word. So every 18 months, it's literally 18 months that Reddit will repost murals, panoramas, and triptychs, because they often don't know what a polyptych is. And it is magic card art that is one painting, but they chop it up and make multiple cards out of it.
Yep.
So notable examples would be like the Arena promo lance. It's 5 things, or the Judge Foils by Therese Nielsen. There's 5 things. I own a few of them myself, like Scars of Mirrodin Swamps. It's actually one painting, and they chopped it up into 4 different swamps. Well, here...
Insult to Injury, right? Lucas Graciano. It's all one painting, but they put it into.
It's a diptych. It's boom, boom, 1, 2. And the term comes from like a religious term, because a diptych would be like on an altar or whatever, and it would open. Or a triptych would open, it's like a before, after, and during, very religious based. And what these guys did is they made these paintings, and they were big, and then they took like a third, and then they made 9 scenes of the contraption. And everybody knows this by now, but sometimes you haven't seen the full art and actually soaked up what looks like in between the margins.
Yep.
In between the card arts. That's the really cool thing that you have to look at closely, and take time to do that, because I think some of them, like the bees in Chuck Lucas's art, are really sweet. Jason Felix, you get to really see like almost like a chutes and ladders lines that connect your eye from each piece when you see the overall work.
Yes.
They're just lovely. And Ralph Horsley actually made 9 paintings. They're huge.
Yeah, these are gigantic.
They're huge, like 19 by 25 inches. They're huge. And he sold a bunch of them. He's keeping one for himself, which is super cool. But this sort of thing, it's hard to do this in a core set. It's hard to take 9 pieces and give them to one artist. Yep. Or in any expansion to say, hey, Amonkhet, I want you to make a training scene in front of a pyramid, and you get 9 card commissions. Like, how big is that painting going to be? Like 36 by 48 inches? Like, how much detail? Or digitally, like, man, can you imagine how big that file size is? Just exporting it.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about, how to compose a scene in the last one in terms of the art test with horses. How do you compose 2 figures talking to each other? These are not assignments that you just give to any artist, right? These are very intentional, because to compose something with this much action going on is a feat in and of itself, because you have to paint a scene that sort of works together, but also works in 9 different pieces. And I don't know, there's just tons going on. You'll see it in the video. I'll slowly, go up and down all of these, but yeah, you should appreciate the fact that even to like put this on paper is a feat in of itself.
Right. I mean, they gave these posters away at game stores, and they're hard to find. This is going to be one of those things in like 10 years where you're like, oh yeah, my game store has one on the wall, when they maybe do an unset or 2 pass, and you're like, man, that goblin one is really, really cool. I'd love to get a reproduction for my kids' room, because that's exactly what these are. Yeah. They're totally the art you want to put in a kid's room, and a kid in a crib could look up and really examine it, because they're super busy, a lot going on. It's the perfect thing for kids, and they're colorful. Yeah. So I'm all a fan of them using that idea and then using it into the stores as poster prints, like. Just really, really mindful work by Don Uren on that, to say, like, how can we reutilize this better? How can we get our marketing team and community team and stores involved? Just really, really brilliant work that I think could be overlooked.
Yeah, agreed. Especially because contraptions themselves are not something that are going to stick around Magic, so we're not going to have an opportunity, like you said, to do this. So.
Not a ton. So we talked about a couple of these dudes: Ralph Horsley, Prescott, killing it per usual.
Yep.
These are guys we already know. They've been around a while, so they just called them up and like, Steve, you do the Whimsy well. You busy? Come on in.
You busy, bud? I need some more gobos. Yeah.
But there's other dudes too, though.
Yep. Steve Prescott has been around Magic forever. Always, like Mike said, he's pointing to Steve Prescott anytime he comes up in a set because Prescott will usually get something, a little sillier or a little lighthearted. Notably in Ixalan recently, he had the commission to do the goblins, but they look like monkeys, right? So
awesome.
So Prescott's great with that. Another notable returner, of course, if you're going to put anybody in a world full of ridiculousness, it's going to be Wayne Reynolds. It's going to be Jesper Icing specifically. My boy Jesper, I love him so much.
Yep, it's true.
So, we expected these artists to show up. Jason Felix, Mike Burns. We talked about Mike Burns a little bit, but Mike Burns' gobos are 10 out of 10. He understands goblins. He understands the visual style that a goblin needs to be funny and silly. Jeff Maracula, who's been in the game forever, has made a triumphant return in Unstable as well with Krark's Other Thumb. We talked about that a little bit. And Zoltan Boros is back here too. So these are the notable returners that you would expect to see in a set like this, and it's good that they got some commissions. Now, a lot of folks on Twitter were asking, why does this set look so much different? Like, what's going on? And as I was scrolling through Twitter while preview season was going off, I just saw a flurry of names that I didn't recognize at all. And I keep up with Magic artists. I know who's making art right now and who are the guys that come back for a set and then go away for 3 sets and you wonder what happened.
Right.
But for me, I was like, I've actually never seen most of these names. So I counted, I did a Scryfall search, 1 by 1, card by card for artists. 21 Magic artists that don't normally do work for Magic have appeared in this set.
Ridiculous.
So 21,
ridiculous.
To trust a big project like this in the hands of artists that usually don't do, work for Magic, I think very much paid off. The risk paid off because, inevitably, if you keep working with the same crop of artists, you're going to have a sort of cohesion between the sets. That's kind of what you want in a brand like this that produces expansions every year. You want to keep that visual style very high and tight. But for Unstable, they bring out 21 artists that usually don't do work for Magic. So I'm going to go through a couple of these,
right?
Who either have never had a commission or very recently just were commissioned. We talked about Mike Burns. Mike Burns had Sting Scourger and Amonkhet, and he had another card in Hour of Devastation, and now he's off to the races, right? They're just going to keep giving him pieces because he can do the whimsy, but he can also do the serious stuff. I think he's going to be successful in Magic for sure. Andrea Radek, you brought something up about Andrea before the show, right, Mike?
Yeah. So I saw her at IlixCon this past year. She's the one that makes all the pins. Okay, what else? I mean, if you go to any of the Star City Games events, you'll notice that the playmats, they're all her. The red carp, the otter spell, all that jazz, it's all her. So she's not really new to you, but if you actually take a step back to say, wait, she hasn't been in Magic yet.
Yeah, there it is. And it makes sense for what she was commissioned,
100%.
right? These host creatures that are very cute, but then it's, the humor exists because you have a kitten, but on the other half, it's the other half of a shark or whatever. So that's why she got this section of just host creatures.
Yep.
We've got one of my boys, Sean Murray, that I'm going to talk about a little later. He actually debuted in Kaladesh, but like you were saying, Mike, he probably got on in Unstable, and then they kept giving him work, but the timing was different because Kaladesh came out before.
Correct.
We had a return of Bryn Metheny, who had 1 card in Commander, like the OG Commander sets in Gahiji Honored One. So that was a bit of a throwback. You haven't talked to this artist in like 10 years, and then they come and make Magic art for you. Mark Bem, I really dig his work. He debuted in Amonkhet as well, but only has a handful of cards. A notable one in Hour of Devastation was Ramanap Excavator, the Crucible of Worlds on a dude. So 21 artists total. I'm not going to go through them all. I'll put a list on the video and in the description, but that's why Unstable looks different, because you have artists that don't normally do work for Magic come in, and under the direction of Don Murrin, they put together this entire world, and again, I think the risk paid off.
Yeah, it's nice to see some new blood, and frankly, the game needs it, and I think that's as far as I can go for real talk there. But from behind the scenes, what you guys may not know is it's hard sometimes to get the fan favorites making the things you want to make. So, for example, Todd Lockwood makes great dragons. It's known. Everybody knows Todd Lockwood can make dragons. Yup. Problem is, sometimes when you call up Todd Lockwood and say, hey, would you make me a magic dragon? He's saying, yeah, I'm working on 2 covers right now, and I'm under deadline for the next 3 weeks. I'm just slammed, man. Maybe next time. And when you're Todd Lockwood, he's going to be busy all the time. So when he has time, she'll say yes. But when he doesn't, tough. And as the game ages, you have these waves where you need new blood. You know, you need the Randy Gay August when he's 21 years old, working back in the day in alliances. Because you just needed new people. And same thing happened here, and same thing happened in M10. You just needed new blood in. And right now they're sitting at the place where Chris Ron made Planeswalkers, plural. But you got to ask yourself, who is Chris Ron in 3 years? Who's Chris Ron in 1 year? And those are hard questions to really ask. And you have to always be planning for that succession plan to say, if we have 2 sets, 3 sets going on at the same time, if I'm asking a traditional painter, they can't paint faster. Like,
right.
Red paint still has to dry. How do we get more people involved in it? And, you know, sometimes it's a test with a promo card, which worked with Zach Stella, and he did, you know, wonderful work, and then now he's just one of the normal people now. And here, it gave us a huge opportunity to use a ton of new people. And I'm seeing folks in like, oh, they're just getting into Magic now. Oh, okay. I'm really happy to see it. Ben Wooten's been working for like ever for Pathfinder and a variety of other things. Tom Babby the same way. His dragons are super fired. You don't even know yet. Alex Konstad is killing it in the Warhammer world. Nobody knows who this guy is. He showed up at his portfolio review 6 years ago with a fully finished portfolio, and he wondered, am I good enough? Like, he's that good. You just need to push the man a little more. You know, so I'm excited for the future in these things, and it's more than just this set. It's 2 years down the road, Conspiracy, because you have a crop of people that have been sitting here forever. Like Bryn has been at the events. If you go to art cons, you see these people, and you're like, I wonder why they haven't got any work yet. And then they work on a new thing. Bryn does shark calendars. Literally, she made a calendar of sharks that are cats, but they're sharks. But they're cats. Okay. It's like cat sharks. And you're like,
sure.
Oh, unset. Okay. You know, and you can start to see the things move together, and you're like, all right, you got back in on that other win. So it's really exciting for that, and it allows for more people at events too, at GPs, more than artists that you may be used to, that you might find like, oh, one lives near me now. Oh, well, that's cool. Yep. I hope my local TO or my local LGS guy calls them up. That'd be sweet. And I'm guessing they will. So we'll put some more contact info in the next few months of all these people to get that out.
Sure.
But as we're running downhill, Sam. We got to get to the standouts.
Let's do
the pieces that we look at and people are like, oh, biscuits. Oh, biscuits. They're good. And I'm springing one on you hot, and that's the Wayne England sketch.
So the Wayne England sketch, of course, most folks know that Wayne England passed away, and the story behind this is they gave Wayne England very cryptic commands, the Commissioner for Very Cryptic Command, right? So that's another visual, callback to Cryptic Command, which he also provided work for. Also provided work for World Gorger Dragon. I recently put that in Felden. Gorgeous piece, gorgeous dragon. We're talking about dragons, so shout out to that piece. So he got the commission for Very Cryptic Commands. It's a sketch, and Mike, you're going to make a big deal out of this because this is the only time in the history of Magic where a sketch has ever been printed on a card, right? Well, sketches are usually you just send it to the art director, and then and then they approve it, and then you work on the final piece.
Yeah, clearly,
right?
or even color studies. And this has happened in other games. I mean, it's happened in basketball cards too, where they do an outline or what have you. Magic has never done it, and it's not because they weren't interested. It was more of, well, it didn't always fit. Foiling could be a little goofy, but here this is all they got.
Yep.
Wayne literally passed away, and this was on his drawing table. We heard the story from his agent, Mark Aronowitz, that either they would accept the sketch as the final piece, or they wouldn't accept anything at all. Yep. Like, his wife was like, no, you're taking this or you're not. And, Wizards really, really understood that, and I really give a lot of respect to Dawn. I don't really know Dawn well. I have not met her at an event because they're just busy these days. But it's a tremendous amount of respect to say an artist passed away, and the last thing they touched, we're going to memorialize. Yep. And as our artists are aging, this can happen a little more often, and we need to be more mindful of what happens when a part of the game is taken from us, when that disappears. A signature is one thing, but the art itself it becomes a symbol of it. So every time you draft this set in the future, you can every time think that, and you're like, yeah, man, he made some really cool art. That was a really cool thing that Wizards did for them, and that'll be there forever. And I think it's a really good precedent for them to set. Yes,
it's a perfect precedent. It was a good opportunity for that, and I'm glad they incorporated it into the game. I agree. I can't say it any better than that.
And the foiling was done well. The graphic designer working on it, that really foiled the background, so it made it look blue. Cool. Really cool. Really well done. So instead of like foiling the lines, they foiled the negative space. Really smart.
Awesome. Super cool.
But getting back to our Whimsy thing, give me a standout Whimsy work, Sam. What do you got?
So Standout Whimsy. Nothing's more whimsical than a goblin rock concert, baby. This is Hammerfest Boomtacular by Dave Alsop. So it's a rock concert. Again, this is a card that you have to sit down and look at the high-res JPEG, because at card level, you're probably just going to pass it. You might skim the surface and forget what it's all about. But now I'm forcing you to look at it, and you're going to have a ball with it. Just like those Animalia books, just like the 11th Hour. The longer you look at this, the harder you laugh, the funnier it gets, right? So, front and center, stage right a little bit is the lead singer. He's got like this pink, almost like a troll doll haircut going on. And he's shouting out to the crowd. Up front, you got two big goblin bouncers. Their noses are gigantic, real super stoic, super serious. If you've been to a rock show, that's what they have to look like, and they have to pretend they're not enjoying the music. Next, in between them, you've got the stage diver, right? I love that Dave Alsop, he had to grow up going to concerts. Like, you don't paint this if you don't know what a rock show looks like.
Totally.
You got this. The goblins are just rocking out. The dude's guitar is like a shovel, but it's also dynamite. It's everything you want in a card like this, and it looks like they're playing with pyrotechnics. Everyone's got dynamite up instead of flashlights. So this is all about to explode, and it captures the goblins on this plane very well. They're all about just blowing themselves up. So I love this because
it's the nth degree of this, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. So it's silly. It just made me laugh so hard. I had to bring it up. I think it's a well-composed piece, and again, it's better. It's not at card size. It's better at the full-res JPEG. So keep looking around. Even on the far left, you've got basically the hangman who's about to detonate the entire stage, and
sweet.
It's just silly. It's just fun. So we have to have fun with this set, right? We don't have to be super serious.
Well,
this is the fun.
This is totally the whimsy to the next level. And you mentioned another one, like modular monstrosity, which I heard you say before mentioning this goblin. Literally, you snuck it out because it's so fun. Like I heard that.
It put its arm out, man. Modular monstrosity.
It really did. Like it put out the pancake hand, and you just got. Coach said we're hungry. We came to eat.
I'm gonna call this the stay-at-home robot. Okay, this is the stay-at-home robot taking care of his or her kin. You've got about 26 robots wheeling around the house trying to get to school. Dad's already away, so mom's got all the responsibilities. In one arm, we've got a coffee. Bottom right, we've got the coffee mug or the coffee kettle warm. if you go to the center, we get those real world objects I talked about at the head of the show. You got the whisking. She might be making more pancakes in that pot, and then to the left, her right, we see the stack of pancakes all ready to be eaten. A spatula flipping a flapjack off a pan. Behind that are some bubbles, right?
Yeah.
On the top, we've got a monoscope and a Swiss Army knife with scissors ready to go. Presumably that's a toy. It almost looks like Yoda, right? It almost looks like Yoda.
I like
that's
that.
also a reference to the other the mural that we talked about earlier. That's one of the shapes that came up. Bottom left is a ball. You gotta make that good boy fetch.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a really silly piece. Alex Konstad, you were talking about him a second ago, just killing it. So I can't handle this piece, man. This is another one that, again, just like Animalia, you got to look at, and the longer you look, the more you can laugh at it.
It almost feels like that Goblin Artisan, except it actually shows us what everything does.
Sure.
You get the Goblin Artisan in Scars of Mirrodin, 5-drop 3/3, and it says, you can give a thing flying or trample or haste or whatever, but you don't really get to see any of the things it actually does.
Right.
Where here I'm literally going to show you everything, and then some, and then some more. And it's just so jam-packed and busy that, you can see, it's a golem, and then you have to look way closer to see that. So luckily JPEGs exist for this sort of thing. And I encourage anybody that plays this, definitely look at anything golem-based a lot closer.
Now this is walking towards us. It's a walking machine that presumably can walk, got legs. There's a token that might have slipped under the radar. You're going to talk about it. I'm setting you up because this token walks, but it might be referencing Studio Ghibli, perhaps. And another very famous piece of literature. So what's going on here, man?
So I've been posting art, as I always do on Twitter. Sometimes artists post things right away. Sometimes they don't. Whether they use a Twitter, whether they use the right hashtag so people can find it. It's just something I do because I use them for articles. So it's self-referential. And I remember looking through tokens and saying, nobody's talking about this token. Well, that's unusual. And this construct token by Matt Gasser is such a fun piece. It's obviously a Don Quixote callback because you can see the knight, attacking the windmill. Like, okay, I get that. That's fine. Neat. It's a construct too. It's nice. It looks like watercolors. It has that very Professor Layton feeling, which is everywhere in these sets because it's steampunk and that some of that flat Adobe Illustrator color, which also can look like watercolor if you add a little like edging to it. But this is Howl's. This is Howl's Moving Castle. It straight up is a Studio Ghibli throwback, and no one talked about it, and it drives me nuts. Like no one's mentioned this at all to be like, oh, that's straight up Studio Ghibli. That's really fun. But it took us like weeks. We had to see a high-res image for someone to finally be like, oh, that's what it is. Like, and you need to get an animated GIF of this right away, and people are going to use it forever because it's such a cool thing. And how do you not use this construct anytime you need a construct? Because it's so self-referential to the real world, and it has more than just meets the eye, and that you get to compare it to other games. And Transformers, we already did that at the HasCon previews, but here it's referencing another work that is beloved by millions. And it's just a fun piece. This is something you can frame and put in your house as a print, and no one's going to think, that's Magic Wizard. No, it's going to be, it's just like a fun kids lit literature thing.
Yep. It looks almost fairy tale-esque, that green and that blue, it's just really bouncy, really light. I agree. It's just gorgeous to look at, too. So I'm glad you brought that to the fold, man.
The Howl's Moving Castle is so good. It's so good. And if people haven't seen that movie, please watch it. It's so fantastic. Any of the Studio Ghibli works are great, but the Howl's Moving Castle, you'll find a lot of referential things in other media, which, of course, the unsets work on really well, Unstable especially. But also you'll start to see that in other Magic sets. Like, it just seeps in because it's part of our consciousness. Like, how much is another brand kind of sneaking in here and there without even an artist sometimes knowing? Here, obviously, you can see it with the feet, but other areas you'll see that too. So, awesome stuff there. I found that the self-referential alpha piece. So I run the Alpha Art Project, which I'm trying to document all the alpha artworks where they are. Not because I care who owns them, but mainly to see what's been destroyed, what's gone. Because once something's gone, you can never put it in an art show. I can't bring it to a museum if the piece is just missing in action. Flood, fire, whatever. Like disgust. Like things have happened. They totally have. And from me, looking at a couple things in Unstable, I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're going to do any of that. And then I see Teacher's Pet, Sam.
Yep.
What's up with this bird?
Teacher's Pet is a card that, like you were talking about earlier with Time Spiral, new Magic players don't understand Time Spiral, and then 2 years later, after you've been to the game, you go back to Time Spiral, and you're like, oh, I get it now, right? So it works. That's its function now. For anyone joining the game the last year or two, Time Spiral will only get better with age. Teacher's Pet was a learning moment for me. I haven't been playing since Alpha, so I look at this card, I'm like, man, I really dig this. I really dig this a lot. I'm going to talk about it because the subtype is cat, bird, scientist. It goes perfectly with my main theme of having an eagle with tiger arms, examining an anglerfish. All of these animals are real-life animals, and then the scientist thing is really silly because it's anthropomorphized. And then I read Teacher's Pet, of course, is a reference to old school Alpha Arts.
Natural selection. Get it together. Natural selection.
You deleted my. I couldn't remember. Natural selection.
It was the green card that you get to look at the top 3 cards, which made no sense in green. It made no sense. Like it stopped at unlimited, where they're like, yeah, that doesn't really, that doesn't make sense at all. And it was like a bird, tiger, like what? I don't know what's going on. It was cool. Card's good, and it's an instant, which is so strong in green. But you'd see this in some of the old timey comics. Every now and then they'd throw in one of these like old timey creatures, or in an old story in the Duelist, but you don't get to see it all that often. One other example would be the surgeon. What is this thing? There's a surgeon, the orcish surgeon that would had a piece of him on the side. Boy, this is gonna drive me nuts. And he stitched together different groups, and one of them was that creature, and that was the only self-referential piece of it, which is unusual to have really, really old things that no one's going to notice, no one's going to care.
Sure.
But for those like 15 people, literally like those 15 people that will get it, they will lose their mind.
Yep, exactly. And that's what it's there for, right?
Yeah, it's Goblin Chururgeon. It was Fallen Empire's piece. I mean, super far back. Phil Folio, your boy.
My boy.
Made it. And there was
Folio, not a Foglio, sir.
Sam Gaglio.
That's it.
And it had like, Llanowar Elves and then Natural Selection, and then it had the Uthden Troll. All mixed into one piece. 0-2, sacrifice Goblin, regenerate target creature. But that's it. And it was one of the 3 things in Fallen Empires, and that's the only other really example of that. So bringing that back into it, brilliant work. Utterly brilliant work.
Super cool. And this is another, like I said from the top, this is a new artist, Mark Bem, that's got a ton of cards in Unstable, and I think he's going to stick around Magic because today Rivals Vixalan previewed Polyraptor, and I think Polyraptor is an awesome piece. It's super, super cool. A cool way to depict a sort of clone, the clone trope in Magic, and I'm looking forward to more of his work because he has this sort of realism flair to him. I could see his painterly qualities, and I love that kind of stuff.
You do. Like you saw Dispossess, and
yes.
It's scary.
Oh man,
it's scary. It's so scary. Like it's scary.
Now, Mike, you put Spike in here? Is that what we're going to talk about? You want to talk about Spike?
Okay, we need to talk about Spike.
Okay.
So they've made Johnny, they've made Timmy, they've made Spike. I'm literally called Vorthos Mike.
Are they going to make a Mike next?
No, they're not going to make a Mike. They're going to make a Mike. It's only the second most common name in the world. But
behind what, Muhammad?
Yeah, of course, behind Muhammad, obviously. But Spike, of anything in Spike, for being a really standout piece of flavor, a really standout card. Cool, the card is very, very strong. It's very, very fun. You get to bring some cards with. Super fun experience. It creates stories. It creates the Gram moments, the Instagram moment, the Twitter moment where you post a picture and you're like, dude, check out what I grabbed from my Spike. That's amazing. Yep. It's great to show it as a woman, too, where you had 2 characters that were male. Great, too. Fun. Fine. I like her hair. I like her hair because it reminds me of someone cosplaying as Joyra.
Ooh, okay.
And we're heading to Dominaria.
Yep.
It's the slight subtlety there. Because you couldn't put a guy with Joyra hair, people wouldn't have gotten it.
Yep.
It'd be like, why does he have red and black hair?
Right,
like, it wouldn't quite... You could make it kind of work as a gender-bent planeswalker things. That's a thing in the cosplay community. But it wouldn't stick as much. Here it's, you're a tournament grinder, and you got a little bit of cosplay flavor.
And you've got a Nope shirt, right? So there's the blue. Yeah. There's the other half of it,
you have the blue-red there in Joyra, and you get this community-based person to say, this person could totally exist, and it's believable.
Yep.
And that's just a really, really great art description writing. Because if she was a normal-looking, woman that doesn't have, maybe just had the hoodie is there, which is very ever-present. Jace Bellerin has a hoodie for a reason. Has a shirt that the community has, really binded around, has some cosplay here that people do, and it just kind of fits it. This is a player. If this is a real-life person, you're like, oh, yeah, that's believable. That makes sense.
Yep.
You just, the only thing better is if she had a backpack on, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She needed a backpack. And it needed to be huge, too. Like, way too big.
The cards are coming out of the backpack.
Just entirely too big and heavy. Like, you really don't need 4 commander decks at a tournament where you're playing Modern.
4? That's it?
4? You're playing Modern. Why did you bring all those commander decks? What are you doing? That would be the only piece better. So that made me laugh and to say, that went a lot of care into this. That's great. You have one more piece, and I see a reference to an artist, also passed, but it's so busy. I don't know why you like this so much.
This is Sean Andrew Murray. Real quick, Mike. Sean Andrew Murray. What's the acronym there?
Sam. I am.
That's me, baby. This is why I like it.
Sam. I am. Right. Okay, Sam. I am. Go on.
You can't search. Okay, you can't search. We're gonna have to fix this on Scryfall. You can't search Sean Andrew Murray because they only have him under Sean Murray on the cards.
Oh,
we gotta fix that. Well, Sean Andrew Murray. Maybe you could just search Sam and he'll come up.
Maybe.
We'll get the goblins on.
We'll get it. Right? We'll get it. Yep.
This is the Grand Calculatron. That's it. The Grand Calculatron from Sean Andrew Murray. Throwback to my Vincent Prost video. Vincent Prost is the same in terms of composing a magic card. He zooms in 300 times and puts little dots and dials where you would never look until you find the high-res JPEG. Same thing going on here. You have a million things going on this piece. I've been following Sean Andrew Murray on Twitter for a couple of years, and his work is astounding. He is a world builder through and through. He has such an awesome visual identity, and I was just so happy to see him break into Magic in Unstable. I think the world fits. In this particular piece, you have this gnome-type character who's become a robot, and he's spitting out papers, and on the papers there's a ton of what would be presumably binary type, scripture on that.
Sure.
But like you're saying, it's busy because there's just tons of details everywhere. You can zoom in, and you'll see that on the clocks, on the dials, on the machines, there are numbers. So I brought up my piece again because I really love his work. I encourage you to just go to his website and browse because he has an imagination that I think is unmatched. It's unbelievable. So I was happy. This isn't a good representation, honestly, of his work and his style. In terms of his possibilities for concept art or world building, but you talked about an artist that you saw in Sean
It's our
Andrew
boy.
Murray's
It's Q.
work.
Homie, it's Q. It's Q.
QH.
Q. So for people who don't know who that is, that's Quentin Hoover. Nobody called him Quentin Hoover. He was Q. That's just sometimes they call him Quentin. It's like the people that call him RK Post, and it's his name.
It's Randy.
It's Randy. If you know him, I suppose. If you don't know him, that it's a differentiating thing. But it was Q, and you could see some of the comic book influence. That I've mentioned it before of the thick edge lines where you can really see something pop by having a little thicker than it needs to be edge line with soft sort of laid in color that's either flat or slowly transitions. It doesn't have layer upon layer upon layer of it, because it could make it a little too busy. So you could see it almost like a gradient in some of these wheels. You could see a gradient gray, and whoop, it's a light gray to dark gray, light gray to dark gray, light gray to dark gray, and it just goes down. Even from his pillars, it's dark to light, dark to light. And by doing that consistently, it makes it a little more harmonious piece. Your eye doesn't fight where it needs to be, so that he can always do either dark to light or light to dark to either push your eye outward or inward.
Sure.
And in doing that with the long arms, the long, like, I don't know, like circular things that seem to be arms, you can see that the light is on the interior parts of it that pushes you to the center of the face, the beard, the white. It's the brightest part.
All white there.
There's yellow. There's actually stark white with his eyeglasses, and it forces you into it, and you can't get out because you hit another wall of where he forces you to not look at, because it keeps pushing you back into the middle, and then you look at this guy with the mustache, and you're like, he's great, and then you go back looking for detail again. And a lot of comic book guys really, really understand that concept. It's really good composition work, and as you mentioned, concept work people, they get that. They understand the scene. Look at how much is used up here. He's even got computers in the back right, even in the back lower left. There's computers back there too. You don't need to paint that. It's not needed. But you can see that he understands the need for it to show how large and how encompassing this is. Really, really beautiful work. It's unusual. Card's strange, but it's super strange. Cool. I think it's fantastic in this set, and I would love to see him get some like really aggressive Phyrexian things to see how he could do, for instead of light, he would move more dark. Instead of it spitting smoke, it's spitting oil. And I think he could do a really, really good job with it. I think it'd be great to show some of the daytime Phyrexians, like the Elish Norn ones that are in daytime, would be perfect for him. Great future ahead of him in Magic. I'm excited for it.
Me too. You talked about comic books. I didn't put this in the show notes. I'm just going to say it real quick. Comic books have... I read an article recently by, I think, Sam Burley on Gathering Magic. No, Sam Burley's a Magic
He's a Magic guy.
Yeah, sorry. It's on Gathering Magic. It's about comic book art and how comic books and Magic are trying to compete with the same sort of storytelling, whereas comics can succeed because you get frames and you get to order them. Magic cards fail because you still have all the frames, but you don't get to, follow the sequence because, you open up a pack and cards are random. So you talked about comics. I really liked the Beast in Show and the amateur auteur pieces and the like from Unstable, because you have these 4-frame essentially comics that are all working under the same name. Again, you can't do this in a normal Magic set.
No.
They are different from like a promo or an alternate art of the same card. These were intentionally made to be the same name, but with 4 different arts or 4 different flavor texts. And I think this is the best way. This is the best way for Magic to mimic a comic in terms of guiding your attention from one frame to the next. So Extremely Slow Zombie.
Oh god, it's so good. It's so good.
So good. Yes. And because it was made digitally, everything could stay within the frame in the exact same way. So same thing with Mike Burns' piece, Beast in Show.
Yep.
So you could flip through it back and forth, and you can see the extremely slow zombie finally raising his arm, and everything decays over time, and you have all the seasons, and at Christmas time the zombie's wearing a Santa hat.
Of course.
Perfect storytelling that can only work in the unset because all 4 cards are named Extremely Slow Zombie, but they have 4 different artworks.
Right.
Same with Amateur Auteur, right? We get to, again, poke fun of Magic's past by visiting 4 different planes, and the flavor text is essentially summing up the stories of the planes we are on.
Totally.
So Zendikar has our boy Vincent Proce, he has those island bowls, which I found on Reddit recently. Did you know this, Mike? Vincent Proce's piece is in the Seattle Art Museum or something? Right?
Well, yeah. So it's the Mopop. So they have a bunch of digital works there. And they have a Magic representation. Yes, it is on my short list of things to get a temporary exhibition working with them, so they have paintings there all the time. But I understand from a branding perspective for Magic, you need to have marquee things. You need to have Jace represented, and guess what? Jace doesn't have that many traditional paintings.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, Alexei Bricklow has most of them done, and he's a digital guy, and that's fine. Yeah. But you can see how a museum is interested in Magic. They really are in the art. It's just, how do you make a show around it that tells a story, that tells a narrative? And some of it you can use unsets to really poke fun at that. Like one showing the one of Zendikar, you could have that almost as an introduction. Like a playful introduction on like a didactic on a wall, the big wall that has the big wall of text. You could have that thing in there to talk about an unset of the fun thing for kids. so that the kids can enter into it and they have their own experience. And then the big wall of white with black text is for adults to hear about Zendikar and what that means.
Yeah.
So you have like a two for sort of experience.
Yep.
But I love those ideas. It's Fallen Empires all over again with different commons having the same thing. Magic needs it again. People really want it, and I think Unstable gave them that ability to test that out again to say, do people actually really want it, or are they just saying that? And it's no, we really do like that. That's really cool again. Please do that more.
And it keeps all these online shops on their toes, because then I have to figure out a better way to categorize their cards.
Totally.
You got to throw them a curveball every once in a while, so it's not so formulaic. You know?
Yeah, I totally get that. There's more opportunities there for more artists to say, would you do 4 of them, 4 different scenes? And they're like, no, I can only do 1. And then you're like, well, what's your name? Phil Folio. And they're like, well, okay. So, I mean, I'm sure they tried to get a hold of those guys to see if they could make something in it. But, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work out. And hopefully with more unsets in the future, we can have more throwbacks to those original artists because, we only have so much time with them. And as fans want them more often, you definitely need to make it known to Mark Rosewaters of the world and the creative team and the art directors to say, we want this person again. Can you make it work? Because they work, a year to 3 years in advance, and it sometimes takes a little while to get that in.
Let's sum it up then. How do we describe Unstable from the bird's eye perspective? How are we going to remember this set in 2 years and 4 years when the new unset is coming out? And I know that it was a risky business move to do it because we weren't sure if an unset was needed, but I think the community really clung to this, even outside of, of course, the Avon Unstable lands. I think everyone has really much, enjoyed the draft, enjoyed the play experience, enjoyed the style. I think a lot of the community gathered around this. So what do we have to say to conclude this from a visual perspective or from an art direction perspective? How are we going to conclude it?
Well, I think it comes down to this is Whimsy done right. And I think other sets that, they tried and it was good attempts. I think this is a fun thing done perfectly well. That you don't need a ton of past experience in Magic to play. Because Planeswalkers are hard. Like, if you haven't played since they've been introduced, they're tough to use.
Yeah.
Here, you can bring this to a bachelor party. You can bring this to a class reunion and just say, we're going to draft this. Remember draft? And they're like, oh, yeah, we played that, whatever, how many years ago? And you could shuffle this up, and it's so weird and so fun that I think people will be keeping boxes of this to draft for years to come. And since there are some really unusual, mega hard to find things, like, a sketch cryptic command that has literally 4 different versions to a weird black border card mixed in there to full art lands that everybody wants.
Sure.
I think if something were to go wrong with it, it's that people are going to want this, I think, before Wizards is ready for it.
Sure.
Because it's been such a success in getting self-references right, getting time to marinate on a weird whimsical set right, getting real world mixed with its own plane done right, and players aren't going to want to wait 3 years. And I hope Wizards is ready for that. That they're going to want it in like 2, if not 1.
Yeah, you're right.
They'll be like, hey, remember that really cool thing we drafted? Like, oh yeah, man, that was fun. I hope we get to do that again, and I hope we get the Commander Silver Border thing for a month again too. That was so much fun. So I'm all in it. I wasn't an unset fan. I'm the first to admit it. I didn't like it. I didn't like them. And now
Same.
I'm sitting here getting like, how can I get a couple more boxes? Real talk.
That's right. No, I'm real talk. I'm the same way. I tweeted out a couple months before Unstable, started previewing. I'm like, this is not the droids I'm looking for, right?
Right.
But I realized that everyone loved it, and I'm glad everyone loved it. To me, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is Magic's version of a board game done right. This is the closest thing we're going to get to a Magic board game that is mega successful with the players of Magic. You can make Magic, inspired board games that, may work with folks who don't play Magic, but I don't think anyone that plays Magic is going to play that game, whereas this is the thing that they found the perfect balance between the card game, the draft environments, the mechanics, and all of the whimsy, all of the visual overload, very little restraint in the artwork. that's why it looks different. We had a slew of new artists to come in and make art for this set specifically. So to me, it just feels like the board game. I'm sitting around playing Commander, and these guys are drafting Unstable, and 20 minutes later, someone's asking me for high fives out of nowhere, right? Like that was fun for me, and I wasn't even participating in the draft.
Totally.
So and then I get a tap on my shoulder 10 minutes later, and some guy hands me his hand, and I have to pick a card from it for some reason, and I'm not really sure why, but I'm just gonna go with my gut and help the dude out, right?
Sure.
That's fun. It really does bring in the game store strangers together, you know?
Yeah, I get that.
And that's all you want from the draft. So it's the board game of Magic. We've got dice. Dice matters, and that feels very down to earth, material board game stuff. And I think I'm with you, Mike. Somehow I enjoy my change of heart with all this stuff.
I like to be pleasantly surprised, and here exactly. I was shocked and amazed, and I want to come to GP Las Vegas, have a draft, throw it out to the Twitters, get some known associates. Hopefully one of the people watching the video today will come up, say hi, and we'll draft it too and have a great time.
Yeah, draft some doggos, some good boys.
I'm all in it.
Some Jesper Goblin good boys.
Goblin good boys, good ears.
Good ears, good noses. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's our Unstable art review. Let us know in the comments below, of course, what your favorite pieces from this set, what your favorite aspect of it is. If you have any points of contention, just at Vorthos Mike. If you have any points of praise, just at Rhystic Studies. And we are going to be coming back with more art reviews. I think we should do one for Rivals once the set marinates. What do you think?
I'm in that. I just want to talk about fish and merfolk, because there's a lot there, dude.
Yes, dude. You know it, dude. And dinosaurs. More dinosaurs.
We'll talk about it soon. I'm in it. Count me in.
Cool. We will see you then.
Cool. I'll hit pause here.